Hey, welcome everybody. We are glad you're here this afternoon, wherever you might be, or might coming up right to 11 o'clock and beyond, depending on your time zone. We know there was a new link that was sent out, and so some people are just getting that a little bit late, so they're going to be joining us when they have that opportunity as they get that new link and are ready to go. And some of you are watching a little bit later. Welcome. You're driving in your car or you're on the treadmill and you're trying to catch up on these leadership lessons. I think you're going to enjoy today's with Pastor Caleb Sargent. I have a chance to work with Caleb on a continual basis. And what he's going to bring today, he's not only implemented here at Southern Hills in Las Vegas, but has trained other pastors on. And I think you're going to find incredibly valuable information. I was just talking with two pastors this morning, separate individual instances, and both were talking about the importance going forward of volunteer development and leadership training. And one of the individuals that I know that does this incredibly well is Pastor Caleb Sargent, for which we are truly grateful. And we're excited about him sharing those principles that he's learned with each and every one of you today. So welcome. We are glad you're here. To each and every one of the members of the ID Network. A special thank you to each and every one. Also, we know that you're receiving good content from this partnership, but you really help us tremendously continue to allow the network to continue the mission of what we have established for many years. Your membership fees and your membership participation allows the network to continue to do the things that we've been called to do. So gratitude and appreciation from each and every one of us in leaderships. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to be throwing it back to Jace. And Jason, if you'll take it from here.
Hey guys, welcome this week. We're glad to have you with us. We had an awesome month of August, and I don't know if any of you were able to go back and watch those replays. Maybe you missed a particular week. All 5 of the Tuesdays that we had in August were really, really great, helpful content. Last week with Mark Miller, Tom Rayner before that, Gary Chapman, the list goes on with who we had in August. If you missed any of those, I would encourage you to go to our Facebook page, the official members Facebook page, and we've got the links that are there. So I want to make sure that you are aware that those are there and you guys watch those replays. Before I introduce our speaker today, we're going to open up in a word of prayer, and I want to call on Adam Bray. I see you there with your Tar Heels jersey in the background. It just feels like the Spirit is in this. Would you open us up in a word of prayer before we get started today? A couple more guys are jumping on here, and then we'll open up our meeting. Go ahead, Adam, pray for us.
Absolutely. Father, we are so thankful once again each week to come together with our friends and colleagues who just love you, Lord, and we want to see your kingdom move forward. And God, I pray that you will use us in each of our areas. We pray for all these guys and girls who are a part of this network. Thank you for the leadership of our network. And God, I pray that you would just use us mightily to just do your work for your kingdom. We pray for Caleb today. Thank you for his time of sharing with us how to take advantage of our volunteers, to use them with their great abilities and gifts that you have given them, and help us to be great leaders in that as well. We love you, and we ask all his name, son Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Adam. Hey, before we get to Caleb, I want you guys to know we're going to do a little something different this month as it relates to the breakout rooms. We're still going to break out, which we were not able to do in August and a couple times over the summer, but we're going to break out into 3 rooms today. And those 3 rooms are going to be moderated by Josh Tice, Jeremy Rands, and myself. And one of the things we're going to do in those rooms is we're really going to have the same group of guys in each room week to week. That way we can have some continuity, a little bit of camaraderie there. And when guys miss, we all know. So whoever you get stuck with today is who you're going to be stuck with the month of September. And if you're here today and gone next week, we are going to be on you to wonder, where are you? Why are you not showing up? We want you here as part of our discussion. So that's what we're going to implement starting today after we have our talk from Caleb Sargent. Caleb is the lead pastor of Next Gen Ministries at Southern Hills. He's been involved in youth ministry for some time now, and he really does a good job with volunteers, and that's what he's going to speak into our lives today. All of us want volunteers. None of us could do what we do without them. And Caleb, I just appreciate you taking time to be with us today. I'm going to turn things over to you. Thanks for being with us, man.
Man, I'm excited to be here, and thanks guys for logging on. I told Jason last week I do not appreciate him scheduling me right after Mark Miller because nobody can follow that. I don't know if you were on last week, but that was fantastic. He did such a great job, and I love seeing the chat just go as everyone jumped in there. But we're talking about a leadership pipeline, and specifically in my context, how to develop a next gen leadership pipeline. So for us at Southern Hills, next gen ministry is 0 to 28 years old. Our Kidopolis is 0 to 11. Our Ascent, which is our student ministry, is 12 to 18. And then Hillside, which is young adults, is 18 to 28. So as I've stepped in this role and as I've been able to serve with our incredible volunteers, the journey that I've been on isn't just the couple years and 4 years I've been at Southern Hills, but it's been 12 years of being in ministry and learning how not to lead volunteers and how to lead them better. And here's the reality. We've all been there, right? The event has to happen. The program has to run. Somebody's got to order the food. Somebody's got to pick up the food. And you're one of two personality types. Either you're the person that's like, I don't care who does it as long as it gets done. I don't care how it gets done as long as it gets done. And you're very much like, hey, I'm going to just, let go and let God, let Jesus take care of this. Or you're the personality that's like, I have a very specific way to get it done. And so because of that, you hold to the old adage of if you want it done right, do it yourself, right? And early on in ministry, I started in youth ministry and we got involved. And so I'm gonna tell you two quick stories, give you the overview of the why this matters, and then give you the pipeline that we've developed here. But I jumped into student ministry and I was excited. We were in Houston, Texas, and I was like, oh man, this is incredible. I love doing this. And we had a volunteer in our student ministry, and she was a young adult. And she was doing everything that, fresh out of Bible college as the fount of all wisdom I'd learned not to do. And so I was like, man, I don't know how to address this. So we started taking her coffee. We started taking her to lunch. She was doing the things like always inviting students to her house, but then students, when and if they would show up to youth ministry, they're like, oh, this individual told us we really don't need to go to student ministry this week because we did her Bible study. So there's really no point in being in youth ministry. And I'm like, man, I don't know what's going on here. So we tried to meet with her, tried to take her to lunch. Finally, we took her to lunch one time. She was doing that thing where trying to create competing events and just really not getting on page. So we take her to lunch, and exasperated, I'm just like, hey, what is going on? And she like breaks down, has this like breakdown in front of me and my wife, and is like, my youth group years were the worst years of my life. I think youth groups are terrible. I think I'm telling all these students that what needs to happen is they just need to hurry up and get to their young adult years because that's when life actually gets better. And in that moment, I'm like, oh man, this is not good. So we prayed with her and cried with her and did all those things and tried to just restore her. But I was like, yeah, she can't serve in our student ministry. And I didn't know this, but the principle that I'm going to teach you, that I'm going to share with you today, began to be in effect in my life. And it goes back to this. Craig Rochelle says this: you can structure for growth or you can structure for control, but you can't structure for both. And what I was doing in that moment was that interaction so scarred me, I guess you could say, that I was like, okay, I'm going to always structure my ministries for control because I don't want someone who's hurting to have access to students and then just spill over on them. That's going to do more harm than good. So therefore, I'm going to structure for control. So for the next several years of my ministry, I used few volunteers and I did a lot of the legwork. I don't mind working hard. I don't mind putting the sweat in, the blood, the tears, all that stuff. And that's how I structured it. Fast forward at least 10 years, I'm here at Southern Hills. God's doing something incredible. Our youth ministry is exploding. We went from 25 to 50 students in the first 6 months that I was here, 50 to 75 in the next year that I was here. God just began blessing. We grew out of the room we're at upstairs. Pastor Josh so kindly is like, this is awesome. I remember we had teenagers try to walk in the room. It was so full, they turned around and left. I told Pastor about that the very next meeting we had, and he's like, nope, that's not going to happen. Let's switch rooms. So he gave us the entire auditorium. He took the adult Bible study upstairs, which he only had like a couple adults anyway. Nobody wanted to come hear him teach. So we had a lot of teens. And so he very graciously made that switcheroo. Not everybody has the pastor that I have in Pastor Josh. And I'm thankful for that. And so when that happened, man, explosive growth just started happening again. And so I knew I'd made mistakes early in my ministry of structuring for growth or structuring for control. So I was like, hey, we're growing. I must be doing it right. What I didn't realize was growth was happening, but I did not yet have structure for it. I think sometimes we're caught in that tension in ministry. We either structure only for control because we're like, man, I've got to know what's going on. I've got to be the person that everyone calls. Or we think growth is happening. If I provide structure, I'm afraid I'm going to kill it. And really, there's this beautiful tension that lies in between. And for me, it's called a leadership pipeline. What started happening with us is we had another volunteer show up. He was gifted in ministry. He'd served in pastoral ministry elsewhere. He was a parent of teenagers. He started plugging himself in. I'm like, great. He started advocating for more control, for him to be able to make more decisions. He started a teen Bible study out of his home, and slowly but surely, our meetings turned from 1 hour to 2 hours to 3 hours. And he started saying things like, hey, you know what? I really think you're just so busy with everything else. Why don't you just let me lead the high school and do all these things? And I started seeing all the red flags I'd seen early on in ministry, but I determined what I'm not going to do is only structure for control again. God is doing something uniquely here in growth. So surely there's a way to have growth, but also have structure inside that growth to structure for that growth. And that's where this next gen leadership pipeline was birthed out of. Now I'm going to share my screen here. I think Kylie, that's you that has to allow me to do that, because I've got a couple slides that I want to show you, and I'm gonna kind of give you. Let me go desktop. I'm going to give you some brass tacks here. I think. Yes. Allow. And if not, maybe we'll just share it. We'll just share it later. Because when I'm trying to share, I should have practiced with this earlier.
It should allow you to share now.
So I think it's my computer that's not allowing me to share. Hang on. Okay, I'm not going to worry about it because that's just taking too long. So I've got it in front of me. We developed what we call a next gen leadership pipeline, and we can share these files later. But basically, it looks like this. And I research a lot of them in the area. So you see the need for it. You see the value of, hey, how can I have growth and still have structure inside of that? And what happened for us was I began to really kind of pray through and develop this leadership pipeline. Now, I really believe that if you're going to lead volunteers, you have to develop a pneumatological perspective of volunteer leadership. What I mean by that is it has to be spirit-filled and it has to be spirit-led. As we interact with volunteers, the worst thing we can do is give them this sort of hierarchy mobile. You guys, if you've seen The Office, you know when Dwight throws the spreadsheet over and it's all black and he's like, you can enact this where I'm in control of everything. What you don't want to do is when you finally get those volunteers that are like, yes, I'm willing to serve, you don't want to throw that black flow chart over it and say, and now I own you. You know what I mean? You want to equip and enable them and say, okay, here's how I can release you to minister through the Holy Spirit. The second thing you don't want to do is you don't want to put someone in a position where they're so uncomfortable, they're not going to lead well. You will see them grow. I think about our middle school girls small group right now. It's led by someone named Nydia, who's part of our team here and actually has come on staff. When Nydia first joined the youth group, she's like, the last thing I want to do is talk. I'll prepare food, I'll put tables out, I'll put chairs out, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I don't want to talk to people. And over the course of the 3 years that her and her husband, Jeffrey, have served in our next gen ministry, she now leads a middle school girls small group. It doesn't just lead it, she's killing it. She's doing an incredible job. Why? Because space for grace was given. She was able to grow into that position. So what we developed was a leadership pipeline that helps us recognize and then release leaders, volunteers, to operate through their Holy Spirit giftedness and to be able to minister to those that are around us. So we identified those in 3 circles. It's really simple. And these 3 circles are this way. For all of our volunteers, no matter what position they serve in, we say, here's 3 circles we want you to be aware of. The first circle is this: you must lead yourself well. The second circle is you must know how to lead others well. And the third circle is here's how to lead leaders well. Now, real simply, when I sit down with them, we begin to pour over this. I set up a meeting. We actually have an application process to be a part of our Next Gen Ministries that helps us with a few things. We developed that through Next Gen Leadership Pipeline, but also in coherence with Ministry Safe. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I think they're going to be at the summit in January. Ministry Safe is going to be there. And they basically say there's a 5-tier way to make sure your Next Gen ministries are secure and safe places. One of those is skillful screening. So our skillful screening process We allow people to apply. And then that gives me a lot of information where I can sit down and go over basically circle one. Are you leading yourself well? And one of my core beliefs is I don't just want to require something. I want to empower something in someone's life. If I'm going to say lead yourself well, okay, what does that look like? Is it just, are you reading your Bible and praying? No, it's deeper than that. The first one we say is you need to be spending time connecting with God. And then we give them a resource called Sacred Pathways, 9 Ways to Connect with God. That's an incredible resource for this reason. It'll change your perspective and my perspective, and it helped change my perspective on, it's not just I spend an hour in God's word or I spend an hour in prayer. Different people connect with God differently. One of our next gen leaders, his name is Thomas. He is the area manager for a Bridgestone Firestone. Guess what? Thomas doesn't get up and spend an hour in the Bible and an hour praying. Thomas gets up real early because he has to be at the office real early. So on his drive, his commute to work, he spends that time praying. That's practically what it's going to look like for your volunteers. And that's awesome. But let them know this is a value for us. Lead yourself well. Here's how here's the paragraph phraseology that I use. Scripture is replete with examples and admonitions that before we lead others, we must be willing to be led into our true gospel identity in Christ. We truly believe that we would be doing you a disservice if we asked you to serve without allowing you the time and providing you the tools necessary to develop a rhythm of leading yourself. This process, while deeply personal, should be evident on some level to those we attend church with, live with, and eventually desire to minister to. What am I saying? What am I allowing in that moment? I'm saying, hey, lead yourself well. So if I sit down and have a conversation with someone and all they care about is control, years ago, I heard Dr. Bobby Robertson say this: the gospel light attracts a lot of strange bugs. I thought that was a really colloquial way, a really funny way of saying the reality is ministry attracts two primary types of people: those who want to serve and don't need to be recognized, and those who really want to be recognized and desire control and platform, right? You're going to have both attracted to you. So you need to make sure you lay it out. Look, if you want to lead in our ministries, you have to lead yourself first. What does that look like? Spend time connecting with God, growing in gospel-centered identity. For that, we use the resource Stop Trying, the book by Kerry Schmidt. We want people to own and understand their gospel identity. When we implemented this process, I had a next gen leader I took out to coffee, and we spent some time together, and they just told me, they're like, man, all these years I've struggled with identity and I've never realized why. Now I understand I have a gospel identity in Jesus, and I need to be full of Jesus before I can serve anyone else. Now that may seem to like a basic concept for us as pastors and ministers, but for a volunteer to grasp that, that's huge. That's exactly what we want to do. Understand if you're going to pour out, you have to be full first. The second thing we'd say is grow in emotional health. Believe it or not, I have seen someone serving in a next gen special event ministry who was so frustrated with someone was driving into the church property. This was years ago, was driving into the church property the wrong way, a visitor. He went out and pounded their hood with his fist and said, "You're going the wrong way." Full stop, right? This is a person who does not have a good grasp on emotional health. This is a very emotionally unhealthy person. I was able to observe him and all that stuff. So if I'm putting someone in contact with first timers and children and other volunteers, I want to make sure they at least understand what emotional health is. I don't need them coming up and blowing up every single time they show up to volunteer, but how are they going to know that unless I train them a little bit? So we do all that in circle one. Here's how you lead yourself well. And there's several other things in there: willing to be on time and prepared to serve. I put in there willing to receive professional counseling, because we've had instances where someone needs to go to professional counseling. If they're not willing to follow that admonition, how can I be sure that they're not just showing up to, again, for me, next gen youth group, and dumping that baggage onto students who aren't equipped to carry it, right? So the first circle is leading self well. Second circle is leading others well. What does that look like? We specify a few things: meeting the same expectations mentioned in leading self well, understanding the gospel and other basic Bible doctrines, praying for the people in your group, being available to those in your group, given to a lifestyle of serving others. I give our Ascent leaders a hard time all the time because they come in and they immediately all sit in the back row. And I'm like, That's not what you're here for. You're here to serve. I've taken the chairs out in the back row. I'm like, what are you guys doing? You're here to serve. This is not on time. This is not off time. This is on time, right? So circle 1, leading self well. Circle 2, leading others well. I put in here, willing to take the initiative to communicate with next gen ministry leadership, sharing concerns, needs, hopes, and information as needed. I had, again, one individual who was not understanding this concept, who was telling students, your parents aren't very mature as believers, so you really just need to listen to my counsel, not the counsel of your parents. Again, like red flags, warning symbols going off everywhere. And the irony is, everyone's laughing because that's not unique to us. You've experienced these frustrations with volunteers, but unless you spell it out for them, they don't even fully understand what they're doing. So leading others well, here's what it looks like to lead others well. And what's beautiful is, if it doesn't happen, I now have cause for a conversation that's not personal. I'm not taking this person out because I have a vendetta against them. I'm taking them out because I'm saying, hey, you agreed to these circles of leadership. Do you think in this instance that was leading someone else well? Do you think that was? And you can ask questions very calmly and with compassion in that moment and say, look, I want to make sure I'm living by these. So circle 1, leading self well. Circle 2, leading others well. And then circle 3, leading leaders well. And we have a whole list on this, and I don't mind making this available to this group here, the Idea Network. But areas in which one would lead leaders well are meeting those same expectations, then possessing and utilizing clear communication skills. And I talk about what that should look like. Actively connecting with those you lead and serve with. I put this in here from experience. Fully understands and actively aligns with the direction and philosophy of Next Gen Ministry. There's a lot of great philosophies out there when it comes to ministry. And I am okay if someone else has a different philosophy than I do. I'm not okay with them bringing that conflicting philosophy into our ministry and propagating that and making that the place where they say, well, here's how I think ministry should be done better. Because all they're doing is taking all their trauma and all their drama and projecting that onto students. It's not necessary. So I'll love to talk philosophy with them, take them out to coffee and talk philosophy. But when you show up to serve, you understand, you appreciate, and you align with this philosophy of ministry. And that's a really good calling point for all of us as leaders to develop. And I've got questions that we develop for this afterwards. But the question here is, what are your clear values for volunteers in ministry? For me, I carried very clear values with myself internally, but I never explained those to our team. I needed to make those clear to our team so that if I was getting disappointed, if I was saying, man, this person's not lining up, I had a platform to say, this is what you're not lining up with, not just an internal philosophical agreement I've made with myself, but here's what it looks like. So I would ask myself, and I ask myself this regularly, do I have a growth or a control mindset? Which one do I naturally lean towards? And which one do I need to grow in? How can I lean away? How can I provide structure when things are growing? This is a way that we did it, developing a next gen ministry by leading self well, specifically a next gen leadership pipeline, by leading self well, leading others well, and leading leaders well, and has absolutely revolutionized our next gen ministry. I've been leading in this way for 2 years. A really cool point of just full circle leadership happened a couple weeks ago. One at the Idea Night that we hosted here at Southern Hills. At Idea Night, we had pastors from all over the city show up, and then I had next gen leaders who I've been leading in this next gen leadership pipeline. I had about 12 next gen leaders show up for Idea Night. Why? Because they understand the value of leadership and they're trying to grow in these areas. So I all showed up, and about 25% of that room was my next gen team. And that was such a cool moment, not for me to look at all the other pastors and be like, losers. It was for me to say, I'm investing in these people. These are people that matter. And in turn, they're turning around and investing in 120 students, 50 young adults, 200 kids on Sunday morning. This matters. We had it just the other night, Sunday night, we had our training for next gen leadership, and then I'm done. And whoever can take over, whether it's Jason or Kylie or Pastor Josh. Sunday night we showed up and we had our next gen leadership training. So we just full circle, we hit all these, and half of the room was students and young adults who have been through this process on the receiving end. And the other half of the room was leaders who have invested in these students. So I just said, if you're a leader and you've invested, and Scarlett Tice is there, And Emerson Combs is there. Some of our staff, teenagers, say if you've invested in these people, Vinny and a Christian, who have been teens and now are young adults. So if you've invested in Awana or in Kidopolis or in the Ascent in any way, just raise your hand. Here's what was really cool. Half the room raised their hand saying, we've invested in these leaders. And the other half of the room raised their hand and said, these people have invested in us. And now they're all investing in the next generation. And for me, that happens because growth is naturally happening. The gospel will grow people, but we developed a structure around that to structure for growth. And for us, it's our next gen leadership pipeline. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Caleb. Hey, for any of you who you weren't that quick to get on the link, we actually established a new link last week, and that was the first time we used it. That is going to be our link going forward. So if you want to mark that, notate that in your calendar, that's what I do with mine. But since having to switch accounts and switch links, not all of the widgets that we use at the bottom are available. And I just found this out as soon as Caleb started talking. So Kylie let me know. We are actually not able to break out into rooms today. So we're just going to do it old-fashioned style. I'll stay right here in this room. I'm going to moderate and ask you guys some of these discussion questions. And Caleb, thanks for that talk. Very practical stuff, really good. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. And the good news is when the technology doesn't work the way that it should, and you don't get to share your screen, we call that a resource. And we will make that available to all of you watching live and those watching on replay. So yeah, if you want to send that to me, we'll get it loaded and get it in these guys' hands. Okay, he went over a couple of these questions, but I'm just going to start. And go ahead and give you question number one, and then we can just jump in. I'll tell you what I'll do is instead of giving you question one by one, I'm just going to go ahead and post it right here in the chat. These are the discussion questions. Number one, do you tend to lean toward exclusion, which is do it all yourself, or inclusion in your style of leadership? What is your bent? What are you more prone to doing? And then I want to hear why that is. Anyone want to go first? Not all at once, please.
Andrew has his hand up. Andrew Peters.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I will, since nobody else was. First of all, Caleb, you came to our church a year ago here in Gardendale. I don't know if I'd said it to you before. I had COVID that week. Didn't get to say thank you. Really appreciate you speaking into our students. I have switched. I started out leaning towards exclusion. As for 13 years, I was assistant pastor of this church as a small church. And as the assistant pastor, you try to do your best to take everything off of the pastor. And so you really learn to try to do it all yourself, be good to your pastor. Now that I've been a senior pastor for 4 years, I am desperately trying to break myself of that habit, recognizing my need to bring others in and give other people in the church opportunity to serve, and the need just on the growth side to be able to include everyone in that process. So it's definitely been a process for me personally.
Thanks, Andrew. Who else? Who wants to go next? Inclusion or exclusion? What are you more prone to doing? Yeah, Larry, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm just like that other gentleman just spoke, that I'm more of a control it kind of person, but I started off in youth ministry, and the only way you could really know for sure it was going to get done is to just do it. And so I got a bad habit going early on of just doing it all myself. Plus, I was at a very small church, so there wasn't a lot of people to even choose from. And like you said, you don't want people coming in and bringing their baggage and a couple of bad experiences. You just do it yourself. And as a senior pastor, I'm telling you, you can't do it all. And so you're by force, you have to shift. And now getting people to recognize those things, this is very helpful for me because it's helping me recognize some of the areas I can help some of our leaders. I'm not even talking about just next gen. I'm talking about the entire church where there's just so many different avenues. And so definitely leaning the other direction now, like Andrew, and just trying to really give people opportunities to be a part of it and creating that pipeline or that flow that they can grow into. And so definitely my bend is to do it myself. No one has my energy. At least that's my mentality. Of course, other people do, but it just takes a while for me to get moving in that direction. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Larry. I definitely could see that. And that's my bent as well, is I'm gonna exclude everybody else and do it all myself. I'm an Enneagram 8. And by the time I think of who can do it and I explain it to them how to do it, and then I tell them the way that I want it done and the wrong ways that I've done it. And this is the way that it should be done because this is the way I've done it and this is the way you should do it. I may as well just do it myself. But you're right. I fall along that same line of thinking. And so inclusion's the way to go. And I like what you said, Larry, about incorporating other people, because really we're depriving them of having an opportunity to minister as well. That's a great point. Who wants to jump in next? Yeah, Jeremy, go ahead.
I had a pastor asked me to come and evaluate his ministry. His youth pastor was having some issues with. And so I watched this entire youth ministry, this activity. He went and bought everything that was needed for the activity. He grilled, he did the games, he locked the building up afterwards, he vacuumed the floor, he cleaned everything up, and he did the message part of it, the devotion. And he had youth workers, but they were all just standing around. And I watched them. They're like, we don't know what to do. So I asked him that question afterwards. Why are you doing everything? And he said, well, I just don't have people ready to step up. And I said, we had 12 people that were ready, just looking for something to do. And he went right to, well, I don't know if they're ready to teach and ready to really spiritually mentor them. I said, but can they lock a door? Can they clean up? I said, you can mentor them, give them a job, mentor them. And I said, because your message really wasn't that good either, because you were spending all of your time doing everything else. And so I said, anybody could have done a better message than you. Your hamburger was done well, but I could tell the message was very poor because you're doing everything. And sometimes it takes somebody to just come and evaluate you and let them be totally honest with you, because what we think we are is our limitation. And so he was definitely do it all yourself. And he listened. I was so glad that he actually listened to that counsel. And now he's on staff at a church of 3,000 or so people. He could not survive if he was a do-it-yourself everything. So maybe some of us could use somebody just coming in, another youth pastor, somebody local in the area even, and just evaluate us and let us know where we stand. Because a lot of guys don't really know where they are. And it's a detriment to their ministry if they let somebody speak into it.
That's good. Who wants to jump in next?
I'll
Jason.
double down with what, sorry.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I'll just double down with what Jeremy said. I agree. It's no different than what you could see in a local church where the facility has been let go. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to come in, a friend to come in and say, hey, look, I don't know if you noticed this, but your vents are incredibly dusty. It's kind of gross, but we just overlook it. You should get somebody to clean those vents. And if you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I need to get up there and clean those vents, this conversation is for you. Because that is the tendency of most self-starters. And you're probably in this room because you are self-starters. You're out there getting things done. You're the only one there to do it. And letting go is so hard. So to get an evaluator, somebody who'd come alongside and ask the questions of why are you still doing that, would be hugely valuable. In the conversations I have among the Idea Network pastors, I ask this question quite often. And I did just this morning with a couple guys. What is it that you need most in your ministry right now? And almost, unless they're talking about personal life circumstances, professionally as a pastor, almost the vast majority will say, I need leaders. I need leaders that are just ready to step up. It was years ago, and I understand that. It was years ago that I was in that scenario myself. And I remember spending a lot of time in prayer thinking, God, you've got to send, and their name were the Baileys. The Baileys were early church planters with our team. They were amazing. And I kept praying over and over, God, you got to send another family like the Baileys. You got to send another family like the Baileys. Our church had like 120 people in it. You got to send another family like the Baileys and I, like, the Holy Spirit just spoke to me. And I felt this very strong sense from the Lord. Well, where did the Baileys come from? Well, they came from Liberty. That's where I came from. They came from Liberty. And how did they become like that? Well, because Liberty trained them to be like that. God, send us another Baileys. And the Lord just made it really clear to me. The reason they were such a blessing to us is because another church trained them to be that way. And that I needed to not pray that Baileys would come. I needed to start training Baileys right at Southern Hills. And that shift in mentality, it really has helped our church tremendously. It's then investing the amount of time it takes, the relational time, the training time, the sitting down with a notepad and pen and saying, okay, here, the next 10 weeks, I'm going to just talk to you about what you need to be. It takes a lot of time, but then after 10 weeks, you've got another Baileys. And it's a great point that that Caleb brings up today.
Yeah, good thought. Philip, you were getting ready to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've tended to be more of the do it all myself type. Not because I wanted to, but because many times when I would trust somebody to do something, I would enlist somebody to help out. They just blew it big time, or failed, just didn't follow through or whatever. And those things fall back on me anyway. And so it just, in the past, I've tended to just be very, very hesitant to enlist others until like Jeremy was saying, I want to be sure that these guys are ready, to do this stuff. And but I can, like you say, I can let them lock a door. I can let them sweep a floor. I can let them do some of these things. And in fact, I'm very excited. This Thursday, we're having our very first men's retreat, and 3 of the guys that I've been training are doing the teaching primarily, and they're leading that group, and I'm very, very excited about that. So that's my 2 cents.
That's awesome.
Discipleship. I was going to say discipleship is where that shift came in. As we're going through some discipleship with them, we began to emphasize this during discipleship, and that made the difference for us.
That's really awesome. That's a cool story, Philip. Anybody else want to jump in here? All right, we're moving on. Number 2, what are clear values for volunteers in ministry? Personalize this to your ministry, what you guys do, or what you've realized you should be doing. What are clear values for you as far as volunteers go in your ministry?
Hey, Jason, what do you mean by values?
Yeah.
Or Caleb, whichever one came up with that question.
Yeah. The context there is, so when we developed the Next Gen Leadership Pipeline, what I realized was I had philosophy of ministry. I had values that I wanted people to understand before they could serve someone else. And while I internalized all that, I had yet to place that in front of someone and say, here's some values if you're going to come in. So there are several parts to our Next Gen ministry. The resource Kylie dropped on there, if you look through that, it shows you the leadership pipeline. But one of them is we don't play the sheriff in people's lives. So a value for me is people come to us from all different walks and backgrounds of life. My goal is to not, I've had youth leaders come to me and be like, hey, did you see what this student posted on social media? And they start going through a student's social media and showing me all the things they posted. I'm like, whoa, no. And I don't care. Like, I am here to help this student get to Jesus. I'm just excited the student is here. And so I began to realize that I hold values, philosophical values when it comes to ministry, that I need to start teaching my volunteers, so that if a student comes to meet Pastor Caleb, they're not like, man, this place is loving and this place is gracious and you can just show up. And then they meet another youth leader and they're like, whoa, this leader told me I was dressed wrong and that I shouldn't have this branding on my t-shirt, and I had my headphones in, my AirPods in when I walked in. They said, get those out of your ears, right? Those are two conflicting, and we're all chuckling because we've all either seen it or maybe even a season of ministry thought, yes, that is a value. But we're at the point now where we realize, okay, what are my values? So as you go through, if you look at the resources you go through, a value for me is I need leaders who are centered in their gospel identity. Okay. I don't need leaders who are trying to take students and force them into their cookie cutter version of Christianity. I need leaders who are centered in their gospel identity. What is a gospel identity? It's a great question. Your leader should be able to have a concept of what that is. We use the resource Stop Trying by Kerry Schmidt. And so he teaches 3 different identities: modern identity, traditional identity, gospel centered identity. And so I have my leaders read through that book and address that. And so mine are big concepts. For you, those could be simple values. For those could be deeper values, but that's the intent. And again, what I found was I've had these values for a long time. I just had not sat down and wrote them out. I had not expressed them to my team.
Good thought.
I had a quick question for Caleb, specifically about that. When you were first, before we had a breakout, and you were talking about your philosophy specifically, you said, first of all, there could be leaders that have differing philosophies. And then a couple of seconds later, you said about conflicting philosophies. My first question is, do you draw a distinction between someone that has a slightly different philosophy than you, if it's not necessarily conflicting with yours? And then also when you talk about philosophies versus values, I would see a little bit of a difference between those two, but what would you distinguish between those and how you're sort of describing that?
Yeah, 2 great questions. I'll answer the last one first and go back to the first one. Philosophies and values, the difference is your average youth leader that has not been a part of a church for a while and is coming to you, they have a values-based system. They do probably not yet have a youth ministry philosophy. But in my 12 years of next gen leadership, I've had people come to me who have served as pastors and youth pastors before and want to plug in. They have youth ministry philosophy, and they're trying to integrate that into my student ministry. So you've got to understand who you're talking to in that moment. Most leaders, you're going to have the conversation about values. Hey, here's one of our core values. And I would use those words. If you sit down with someone who has ministry experience and they start saying, well, man, youth ministry philosophy, and they'll start naming people like Doug Fields and Simply Youth Ministry and different things. That's great. Those are great things. Let's talk about that. And so I had a leader who basically said, look, I don't think we're discipling students enough. It's just, it's kind of really surface. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start a home Bible study. So we prayed through it and I said, you know what? Yeah, go for it. Who wouldn't want teens to study the Bible more? And so he started doing that. But what was happening was every student that came to his Bible study, he said, okay, now just so you know, you're a spiritual leader. Everyone who comes to youth group, man, they're struggling. They don't really have spiritual maturity. And he began to create division in the name of deeper discipleship. And so that's youth ministry philosophy. Does that make sense? That's the difference there and why those values matter. And then your first question was, I'm trying to remember.
Was
Adam.
about,
Good to
you
see you.
talked about people that have differing philosophies versus conflicting philosophies.
Yeah.
Are you
So
able to work with someone that has maybe a little bit of a different philosophy if it isn't in direct conflict with yours? Or is that something where you're talking about more growth versus control, where you need to have the same philosophy in that way?
100% you can work with someone who has a little bit of a differing but not conflicting. And the reality is most of us probably in this room would have differing but not conflicting, but we can come together under grace, right? So what I would say is, lean in on that leader, help them grow. You just need to clearly communicate what your philosophy and values are. So that way, I had a parent call me. I was on vacation. I was actually in the British Virgin Islands, and I just saw a missed call, and I'm like, I'm not calling that person back. And I got back to the United States, and then I called him back. Come to find out, I had had a parent who was concerned about a youth leader. Hey, here's the conversation that was had, and I'm like, absolutely, we'll get together, we'll talk. And it was one of those. Basically, they were like, man, we should do more things. We should go out. And the parent was like, I don't know if this is Is this youth ministry approved? I'm all for students getting together, hanging out, doing all those things, but we do specific things at certain times throughout the year. That's just differing philosophies, right? Hey, let's have, it's Friday night. Let's all go see a movie together. Let's all go get pizza together. That's great. I can't do that with 120 teenagers every Friday night, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, if that helps, Adam. Awesome.
All right, who wants to jump in next? All right, let's move on. Number 3, do you have a growth mentality or a control mentality? Caleb talked a little bit about that. I think that was a Grishel comparison there, but growth versus control, advantages, disadvantages. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I'll begin. I have a growth mentality, which causes its own problems. And I'm so ready to just let people have it and take over. And so I'm always cleaning up. It's growing, but I'm cleaning up the mess because it lacks control a little bit. So that's the benefit is things grow. The problem is there's a lot of cleanup after. So I'm always trying to edge that side out of it. So if I have a tendency to fall on one side, it's that side.
Caleb, would you agree with Josh's assessment there? Is that pretty fair?
100%. Yeah, I get to clean up the mess. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just.
All right, yeah, Chris.
I definitely have a control mentality, hands down. And so it really is fantastic to be co-pastoring with the beard Dale Curdy, who is not on the call today and cannot hear me sing his praises, but we'll probably watch the video later. But he has a growth mentality, so it really does help in our planning and how we structure things.
Nice. Yeah, Ryan, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo exactly what he just said. I think that if you are growth, then you better have a control around you to lend input. And if you are a control, then you should probably have some growth around you, because otherwise no one ever deals with the problems. I've had on the church planting 2 growth people, and that was really bad because there was no control. And I worked for a guy who was super controlling, who had zero desire for the growth, but wanted the deep discipleship mentality. And you've got to have a mix, I think, in order to be healthy.
Good thought. Yeah, I think a lot of churches, if you were to think about the senior pastor and the executive pastor, they generally fall on 2 separate ends of the spectrum there, and that's a good marriage of those 2. What else? Anything else under this, or we'll go to the last question? All right, number 4. Have you identified, or who have you identified that could be grown and invited to their next step of leadership in your ministry? This is a very personal question for what you are doing in your local context of ministry, but who have you identified that can be grown or invited to the next step in leadership?
And Jason, I would just jump in and say this at this point. This is something Pastor Josh has really helped me out with, not leaving a meeting without an action item. I think for everyone here, it would be valuable. Now, you know your context, you know where you're at. Maybe you already have 2 or 3 people that are in your pipeline that you're growing, but not leaving this meeting without an action item. And if you just need one action item, here it is. Write someone's name down that you want to start inviting to their next level of leadership. Maybe you don't have a clearly defined leadership pipeline yet, but you want to see someone grow. You know who they are. They have potential. Man, write their name down, because then it's not, an hour of your time wasted. You're like, you know what? I do need to lean into this relationship a little more. And for me, it was, I started identifying some of those people. I was having students graduate and then stick around, incredible young adults. And I was like, man, I really need to plug them in. But there's a little bit of that unsurety about fresh out of the youth group. Should they go to the young adult group? Should they plug back in and serve? And so I'm like, I need a framework. I need a structure that allows me to plug that in. So that's how we develop the Next Gen Leadership Pipeline. But the action step today is, who can I invite to their next step? And I have been surprised. All of the concerns I had about some of our leaders, for the most part, our Next Gen Leadership Pipeline has been the filter that has caught those and at least opened the door for the discussion on these things to say, why do you think this is important? One of the values is willing to show up on time. Why is that important? Right. And you can sit and have a conversation like that, but you got to identify the who.
That's a great thought. I had lunch with a guy last week who wanted to get together, and he's a 20+ year veteran on the mission field, and he just retired from the mission field. He's working at a church, and he said, my biggest problem is volunteers, and you seem to recruit a lot of volunteers at your church. And he said, what do you do? And I said, well, the last thing you want to do is just get up in the pulpit and say, hey, we need volunteers for this. And he said, well, that's funny you say that, because that's all I've done. I said, you need to actually target specific people. And I said, look for people who are faithful, who are there more weeks than they're not. Target them, have a conversation, have coffee with them and say, hey, have you ever been interested in this? But I said, because if you do a generic announcement, no one is ever just going to volunteer like by the droves for your ministries. But if you target someone specifically, you'll have a lot better chance of them tacking on to a ministry you want them to lead. And I think that's so true. What other thoughts? Someone you've identified that can be grown or invited to the next level of leadership. How does that translate for you guys locally?
If you're looking for actionable steps, beginning with that first actionable step of, okay, who is it that I need? Who has the most potential? Identify them and take them out to coffee. Be as blunt and bold as you can. Look them square in the eye and say, hey, man, I need help. And you are a man that can help me. So I'm asking you to make a decision today. And by the end of today, text me and let me know that you're willing to help me in this position, whatever the position is. You say, well, I don't even know what I'll train him to do or ask him to do. Just ask. Then if he texts back and like, yeah, say, and then end in prayer, grab his hand and be like, let's pray. God, I pray that you would help this man to see how much we need him if you believe in him, right? He'll commit. And then at that point, you're like, well, what do I train him? How do I train him? You can look at Caleb's next gen pipeline. There's some great ideas and you can create your own, because sometimes we feel like we have to have every answer. We don't. I think at that point, you can literally say, great, we're going to meet once a week for the next 5 weeks. And you can, just like you do Saturday before Sunday preaching, you can write that next lesson the day before that lesson, before that meeting. And what do you want that usher leader to be? What do you want that first deacon to be? You can write out what you want them to be and then share it with them. And just consistently meeting with them and telling them what to do. It's incredible how many men want you just to consistently look them in the eye and say, this is what you do next. Tell them what to do next. And they'll do exactly what your philosophy of ministry is if you take the time to ask them boldly and then train them properly.
Excellent. Excellent. Who else?
Jason, I mentioned earlier, I've got 3 guys that I've been working with, but a while back, God put on my heart to focus more on my own sons. I have 3 boys that are in their, well, my youngest just turned 18, and so they're in their 20s and teens, and they are the leaders of the church very, very soon. And if I'm pouring into anybody, it ought to be these guys, right? And so I sent them a message and said, hey, as your pastor, I want some time with you, and I want to teach you some things. I want to train you some things. And so I've set appointments with my sons on a weekly basis to talk to them. And being their dad, I know some things going on in their lives, so I've tailored that to where they're at, to help bring them along and grow them where they're at. So
that's awesome. I love that. Good thought. Who else? Anyone else? All right. Any last words or questions for Caleb? It's a good sign.
You writing a book?
Say again, Philip.
I said, are you writing a book? Because this is like drinking from a fire hose. It was great stuff.
I appreciate that, man. Pastor Josh is actually giving me a hard time about sending out resources. He's like, man, you've got to brand it. You've got to put this on it. He's really good at all that stuff. And I'm like, hey, maybe one day we'll see. But thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it. I enjoy the dialogue and just talking this. I love working with volunteers and equipping them to their next steps. And it's been so rewarding seeing that happen and this is a confession, for years I spent time in the control mode, just kind of pushing people away. And now to see that, just the power of multiplication just unleashed in people's lives, it's awesome thing.
Cool. Caleb, thanks so much for spending time with us today, investing in us. For those of you watching live, thanks for being here. Those on the replay, catch us live next time. Just practical, helpful stuff today from Caleb. Next week, you do not want to miss Brian Sams. Brian is a good friend of ours. He's been with us several times. He's one of the keynotes at the summit that we're going to be having in January, but you will not want to miss Brian Sams being with us next week. And thank you guys for being here with us today live on the call. You guys have a great week thinking outside the box. Take care.